Okay, so this is the Answering Kritiks Elective when you're AF. I'm Serena Blutter, a sophomore at Altamont, and um, so here's kind of how the lecture is gonna go. Now that we lost a few minutes, I think it's gonna be a little less than an hour, maybe 45 minutes for the elective lecture about answering the critiques when you're AF, and then we're gonna have some time to have questions or comments. But in general, like if I'm saying something confusing or whatever, just like feel free to interrupt me or drop something in the comment box. But otherwise, is everyone good to go? Okay, cool.
Just to clarify, this is answering case for the AF, right?
When you're affirmative, um, answering a negative critique.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. So I'm mainly going to talk about being a policy AF versus critiques, but a lot of the information can apply to when you are reading a critical affirmative versus a negative critique. And this is just kind of going to be what the topics I'm going to be covering are. There's going to be a lot. Um, and I'm just going to have kind of like the bare bones information on the slide, and then I'll just kind of be talking from there. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to start with like, what does it mean to read a critique? What does it mean to critique something? Basically, rather than contesting whether the AF is a good idea, the plan that you read, the one AC is a good idea, the negative critique will challenge another assumption of the one AC that you read. This could be something epistemic, something ontological, etc. So the main thing that you need to think about when you're AF is that you need to be able to defend whatever assumptions you read in the 1AC, i.e., the critique is going to get up and said that some assumption of your AF was bad, something that doesn't have to do with the pros or cons of the resolution. So you need to be able to think and answer about whatever your 1AC defended, whatever you said in those 6 minutes, if you're in LD. Um, yeah, this is just kind of like thinking about like the negative critique. Actually, wait 1 second. Yeah. Okay, so kind of more broad, I'm just gonna be talking about like what a critique is. So yeah, rather than contesting like the desirability of the outcomes of the 1AC, the critique will challenge like those assumptions. So the critique doesn't need to test whether the outcomes of the act is desirable or not, because they could talk about something totally irrelevant, like the affirmative assumption of the world. And so when you are AF in a K debate, you need to be able to think about your AF in relationship to possible critical literature. Yeah, this is kind of like parts of the critique. One, the critique will make a theory of power, i.e., like some a way that the world works. So I know that like in a critique debate, like you're super scared. They're like the orders one off, like etc. There's going to be like some claim that they make about the world. So I just put in this evidence to the side, this grande evidence from a settler colonialism critique that makes a claim about the settler world and how like settlers are how like their ontology like functions, I guess. Yeah. And then like you have like the links to the AF. So whatever you read in the 1EC, they can critique. Like what were your AF assumptions that were problematic? And what does the critique have? Like what is the problem that the critique has with the 1AC? So like for an example, like with this grande evidence, uh it says that like the AF's like economic relationship to the world is bad and is settler colonial. And then there's like the impact to the critique. So why those links to your app are bad and why the assumptions, the bad assumptions of the app matter and the damage that they cause specifically within the debate space. And then there's always the alternative that is what we're probably going to be talking about the most in the debate. Like, what does like the critique do that avoids the problems it has with the links to the app. And the alternative is basically just like what the critique does that like avoids those problems. I'll give a couple of examples for the alternative. One, like for settler colonialism, I'll probably be using this example a lot. The K will usually claim some problem with the AF, claiming that settler logics encourage native dispossession and oppression specifically in the debate space. And the alternative to this could be indigenous refusal of the 1EC, like i.e. you could endorse indigenous scholarship instead of allowing settler like economics in the debate space. And then most importantly, like we have the framework, the role of the judge, how the judge should evaluate the round. Like, should the judge be a decolonial educator? Should like what does the ballot do in that sense? Yeah. And like if that's confusing, like I'll make it make sense in like a little bit. Okay. Next, what does it mean to be AF in a K debate? I kind of already talked about this before, but this like kind of delves into like a couple of things that you need to win as the AF. You need to one, always be prepared to answer whatever your 1EC defended. So an example with like the wall tax, I don't know if y'all debated on the wall tax, but if you say that like the wall tax stops inequality, but you use like the United States federal government, like you link pretty hard to like settler colonialism, like with the settler colonial state. So you need to be able to defend like why your AF can be like good for like whatever the K has in problem like with the 1EC. And there's a couple things that you need to win. I just outlined two. One, you need to say that the critique is wrong in its assumptions of the 1EC. Like the critique said that you were like settler, colonial, or like capitalist or whatever, but you need to be like, no, no link. We're not. That's not our AF, which a lot of times, you know, it won't be, and a lot of times it will be. So you just need to be ready to defend that. And then the other reason is you need to win that the 1EC plan, like the United States should do whatever, isn't that far away from the ultimate goal of the alternative that the critique reads. And that, like, I don't know if y'all have heard like of a permutation that both the alternative and the AF can be productive together. Like perm do the alternative in that sense. Okay. So now we're gonna kind of get into like more of the basic answers to the critique. Like when you're in like the 1AR and you're getting up ready to answer, you need to like think of your relationship with the critique. Why is it bad to move away like from the pros and cons of the resolution? Because essentially what the critique has just done is they're taking away your policy debate and turn it into something pretty much totally irrelevant. So the AF always needs to say to win the round pretty much that shifting the debate away from the pros and cons of the resolution is bad. Okay, so some of these like top level arguments that I think need to be in y'all's 1ARs for why the critique debate could be harmful is that one, like topic education, because critiques are non-resolutional, that is a bad form of debate because you came to the debate to talk about like the pros and cons of say a wealth tax, and now they want to talk about something totally irrelevant to the debate, like, and you do not get your basic topic education, your like your economic mobility to say in that sense. And additionally, this goes into the fairness predictability debate. The negative can read a bunch of unpredictable critiques that the AF can't predict. There's literally infinite methods that the critique could do, especially when you came in to debate like the pros and cons of the resolution. That's like not predictable. And you say that that's why the critique model of debate could be harmful in that way. Additionally, I put this one on there, the preps view or like the limits explosion. Additionally, that because the critique model of debate is unpredictable and it explodes the affirmative limits because the subject matter literally could be about anything. Additionally, I said time skew for this. You want to argue that the critique essentially mooted 6 minutes of the 1AC because you got up and you proposed this policy action, and then the critique gets up and is like, nah, none of that matters. And you want to say that's bad, and that's additionally like unfair. Okay. So next, I'm going to be talking about the framework level of the debate, which is somewhere that you need to be ahead of coming out of the 1AR. Because, like I talked about before, the critique is going to give some sort of role of the judge, role of the ballot, way that the judge should view the flow or whatever according to the 1AC assumptions, like in relation to the critique. So thus the 1AR needs to be able to answer that role of the judge in what is the best model for debate. Okay, so almost always you will see in either the 1NC or like the 2-1R that you should evaluate the AF as a research project to evaluate those assumptions before weighing the case. And I know like there's a lot of words there, but it basically means that instead of weighing the pros and cons of this hypothetical fiated plan, you need to say that you need to evaluate the assumptions as a bad research project before weighing the pros and cons. Thus, the 1AR, you need to win your framework. Yeah. So what I would do here is you need to say that instead, the role of the judge is to weigh the consequences of the plan. And I put some reasons to prefer. These are like the most basic reasons that you'll like see anywhere. And I think it's like these are the best answers. Yeah. Okay. So you need to say one, weighing the consequences of the plan is better for fairness because you need to say it's better for fairness because if the critique isn't resolutional, there isn't any way for the AF to predict what assumptions the neg could be critiquing, and then the neg essentially gets infinite prep. And it's not fair for the negative to get infinite prep to prep out the AF, and the AF only gets like 7 minutes essentially. So yeah, that's how you want to like kind of go into that fairness debate. And additionally, you want to say that weighing the consequences of the plan is better for clash because if well-prepared opponents come in to talk about like one prepared like resolution, we can have third and fourth level testing of the 1AC and have more in-depth debates instead of if the entire 1AC got mooted and is essentially told that it doesn't matter, that's no place to have good clash about like real world issues. Well, okay, that's like up for debate. I don't know if you would say real world issues because then you link even harder to the critique. But yeah, that's kind of essentially where that's going. Additionally, I would say that real world skills is a reason to evaluate like the role of the judge under to weigh the consequences of the plan because like in the real like world if you become like an economist or a public policy maker you can have these skills from debate to talk about like weighing consequences and to talk about like economic systems like etc and you gain those skills in debate and what the critique has done essentially is take that away from you because they are coming in to talk about something almost totally irrelevant. Does that kind of make sense in that way? Okay, I guess I'll take that.
So one comment, sorry, just for this.
No, you're good.
It's basically you're basically reading like topicality if you read this stuff. Like if you
Yeah,
say
I mean, kind of like a 1AR version of topicality. Like you're talking about if you like read TUSFG or something on the neg versus a KF, kind of. It's kind of like the AF version of that, right? Does that kind of make sense?
yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, great question. Um, yeah, okay. I think that's actually a great point to make because if you're like negating a critical AF, you might read TUSFG like the AF needs to defend a hypothetical implementation. the af in this case is just saying the neg has to negate that hypothetical implementation. Yeah. Okay. Next, I'm going to kind of just talk about um, answering the theory of power, like that first big part of the critique, and different ontology claims that the negative will make. And yeah, and see if like that makes sense. Okay, so first, a lot of like answering different critiques is kind of like a backfile check. Do you have cards to answer different critiques? Like, do you have cards to answer the cap K, the sec call K, fem K, etc.? Because if you don't have those cards, it's kind of like you're just kind of like yappering, and you need like those cards to answer the ontology debate. One thing that I think is the best argument the 1AR can make is that the critiques theory of power is bad. You don't want to just say that the critiques theory of power is wrong. You want to say that that is a bad model for debate because A, it's non-falsifiable. You have no way to prove the ontology claims, like etc. And that the critiques, like whatever the critique may be, like those ontological assumptions, you can't test them. They're quote unquote non-falsifiable, and thus they're not valid. And yeah, and that the consequences of what the theory of power points us to is bad. Okay, so what is an ontology claim? Okay, that's a great question. Ontology is kind of like the study of knowledge. So I'll give an example. They make some hmm, what's the best example? Maybe with the settler colonialism critique, the critique makes some claim that settlers are always primed to take land away from natives. That is like an ontological claim that they're always thinking about native dispossession and never about their relationship with the native. And well, like that is a critical assumption. You do want to say that you can't like prove in a way that ontological assumptions. It's not testable, especially in the debate space where like essentially a lot of these critique debaters just take um this ontology and just like read a bunch of blocks. Um yeah. Um yeah. And then also another good reason like for non-falsifiability with ontology is that we can't disprove that we think a certain way. I don't know if y'all are like field debaters or whatever, but like no intent foresight distinction is kind of like that, if that rings a bell. If not, that's totally fine. Okay, also with the ontology debate, you want to say, I put this up there because I think it's a good argument. If there is a chance that the critique is wrong about ontology, then not taking action by doing the plan is really bad. So you get up and you like, let's say that you got up in the 1AC and read like a structural violence inequality act, and then the critique got up and talked about like your capitalism like causes extinction, whatever. You want to say that if like the critique is wrong about like their capitalist like ontology claim, then not taking action for the 1AC to like end structural violence or whatever is really bad because you had a chance to take action and you had a chance to like get real world skills and you didn't, and that's bad. For some of the other reasons we talked about. Okay, now this is kind of just talking about answering critical framework standards. So usually like the negative will always get up and say critical standards come before theoretical standards, fiated by the AF. So basically that just means that critical standards challenging the assumptions of the AF come before weighing the pros and cons of the resolution. So it's not that hard. All you need to win as the affirmative is your interpretation and your standards. That it's better to weigh the pros and cons of the resolution over weighing critical standards. So this includes impact turning the critical framework standards. So I just kind of made a list of some things that the 2NR could say. Um, yeah. So one thing that they'll say is that critical education outweighs. They'll always say that the critical standards come before theoretical ones viewed by the AF, but you always want to say that fairness comes first. Like to have critical education, there must be fairness as a prereq to that. So if debate is not fair, like people won't show up because they know that losing to critiques is inevitable. No one's going to learn anything because negative will always win and there won't be any more meaningful conversations. So yeah, but you also want to make the argument that AF education outweighs, that debating both the pros and cons of the resolution and learning about whatever your 1EC talked about has value and outweighs whatever like irrelevant, unpredictable thing that the critique did. Okay. Yeah. Another thing that they'll say probably in the 2NR is that structural fairness outweighs. For example, like with the like disability K, they're gonna say that the K fairness standards, like the world is structurally skewed against disabled people and that they are like structurally behind already in this debate in the here and now. So they are somehow like allowed to read non-resolutional arguments. And one, you want to say that like that's the ballot fails to solve like that problem. Like the ballot, the judge like putting in a negative ballot for the critique on tab room doesn't do anything to solve yeah, their standards. And I think that's really important because at the end of the day, debate is a game and people showed up for like fairness, etc. Okay. Additionally, one thing that you want to be kind of cautious of is these fairness impact turns. They're going to say fairness does not matter. And you need to start this on your flow because pretty much it's game over after they say the fairness impact turn. One, you want to say non-unique. You showed up to the activity, you expected the judge to flow, you followed speech times, you followed literally every other part of the game that you literally just critique was bad, and yet you're going to say that like fairness doesn't outweigh? Like that doesn't make any sense, and you need to punish them for saying that fairness doesn't matter, because if fairness doesn't matter, they should just sign an AF ballot on tab room, because then if the game's already unfair, just like give me the ballot, right? Yeah. But then you also want to say, like we were talking about, like with the fairness impacts, procedural fairness outweighs structural fairness, that an AF skew by the critique in this round outweighs any like theoretical like fairness impact turns that the negative could read. And that's more on like the top level framework overview debate that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Okay, so I don't know if y'all are like familiar with the permutation. Are y'all familiar with the perm? Maybe. But this is probably like your best friend in a okay, yeah. I can explain that. Yeah, a permutation is pretty much your best friend in a K debate. Basically, you need to say that both the AF, the 1EC, and the critique can work together to avoid the problems the critique, the negative, has with the AF. And there's a couple of different perms, but at the end of the day, you need to make a permutation because it will always waste 2NR time. And because the 2AR is so skewed already, you want to waste as much time as possible. Yeah. I don't know if y'all have heard the phrase like perm do the AF. It's just saying, I mean, perm do the critique. It's basically just saying that both the 1EC and the K can work together. Yeah. My like personal favorite perm is the perm double bind. The perm double bind just says that either the critique's alternative is not able to resolve their power structures, that proves there is not any generation of uniqueness to its links to the AF, which connects with the alt fails argument that you want to make later. Or the alternative can overcome that power structure that it should be able to also solve the problems that the AF has with the world, which is why we need the AF. And that's already the AF, which means the permutation solves. Okay, I know that was like probably super confusing. Does anyone like want me to like explain that more? Um,
Hey, would you mind saying the basic definition of that again?
like the perm double bind?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sure. So either the critiques alternative is strong enough to overcome the power structures that it has in the world, which means the permutation solves, or the alternative is not able to resolve those power structures, which means that the critique has no generation of uniqueness, which means that the alternative fails, that there's no point in even voting for the critique because it can't solve any of the problems it has. Um, yeah. The main way that you like can't like read a permutation as well, or if you're like in an uphill battle, is in the 1AR, if you defend, like, for an example, capitalism good, and then in the 1AR you say you're not capitalist, and that's going to be like kind of hard because you said in the 1AC you like defended capitalist systems, and then in the 1AR you say you're not capitalist, like that's kind of bad. um okay, the best argument that you want to make that the 200 is going to have to spend a lot of time on is the perm do both argument. You just want to say that the plan, the 1AC, does something with the plan or like with their assumptions that begins the alternatives transition. So I'll give an example with the federal jobs guarantee on the policy topic last year. You want to say that giving power to workers with a jobs guarantee is key to solve like the transition away from capitalism, that the CapK will like have an alt about transition away from capitalism. You want to say that the AF is the necessary first step to get away from that. Does that make sense? um the 1AC starts the alternative. Does that make sense, kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, one kind of like tricky argument that I don't think like enough people read is the mindset perm. Basically, you can do the 1AC through the mindset of the critique, which technically solves because the 1NC, the critique made some epistemic ontological assumption that like rely on mindsets. And if the AF does the AF through the mindset of the critique, just vote AF because you can do both through the mindset of the alt. I mean, through like that ontological epistemic like claim. And I think that more people like should at least have this in their 1AR file because it like takes so long kind of to answer the 2NR. And you want to remember, waste all of the 2NR time that you can by spamming a bunch of arguments in the 1AR. And then basic argument perm to the alternative, kind of like what the other perms I was talking about before. Okay, yeah, perms are great. You always need to make one. Okay, this is like the most, I wouldn't say, like, framework is definitely the most important part of the critique debate. The answering the alternative is super like important. Yeah, as well. Okay, so the first argument that you always want to make is that the alternative fails. Whatever the alternative claims to address, it can't. Like the world can like never accept the alternative, like it won't ever happen. And here's the thing, if the critique gets up and it's like, oh, we fiat it, like we fiat it, it's gonna happen, like AF gets fiat, you want to read theory on that because the negative does not get the same fiat that the AF does. Yeah, and if you can make it all fails claim, then at least if you're behind in the ontology debate, the judge can like look back at the flow and be like, wait, but if the all can't solve, like why can't like the permutation just be like a preferable idea? Yeah. Okay. Um Also, with the all fails debate, one core argument that you want to say is that the alternative does not claim to solve as much as I think it like as they say it does. Especially star this, like if they make a root cause claim, like the critique is a root cause of the app's problems, you always need to say like make a claim that the critique's alternative does not solve the problems it has with the app or doesn't actually solve the app. For example, like with the CAPK, if the CAPK claims that like capitalism is the root cause of inequality, but you can just say that like transition away from capitalism fails, then it can't solve the root cause that they said it does. Okay, especially the second argument is that case outweighs the alternative. This is especially I think important in policy debates instead of over like critical debates because like I'll get to that in a little bit when talking about more specific critique answers. But generally, if you read, let's say like a utilitarianism, like with extinction first framing, you always want to say that a risk of the case harms outweighs the alternative. Like, for example, a risk of extinction outweighs any like risk of, let's say, a capitalist transition towards whatever the alt says. And this is really important because this is a way to get back from the time skew that the critique has put you in. You can still use your case. This is the time where you need to be defending those assumptions as well. Okay. Also, I think the link turn is a pretty good, like, it's a decent argument. It's better than no link. Just say that whatever your 1AC plan did disrupts whatever the critique is like talking about. So, I mean, I don't know if this like explicitly makes sense. But you just want to say that the plan disrupts the critique's critique in a way. Yeah. Okay, anyways, the fourth argument is the no link. Generally in the 2AR, I don't recommend going for this no link argument because most times you will end up linking to the critique, and I've seen judges like really don't like it. But no link is always good to have in your 1AR and in your backfiles because it makes the 2NR waste so much time explaining each individual link to your app, which means that they don't have other time to answer 1AR theory, like etc. Also, an example of this is that if you read a like whole res structural violence app, you're still going to be like pretty capitalist, even if you don't explicitly like disrupt capitalism, which means like at the end of the day, like you're probably going to like link decently hard. The fifth argument is that I think kind of relates to the case outweighs stuff is that the affirmative analysis is good. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of the lecture, is that you need to be defending those 1AC assumptions, i.e. like you read like that whole res structural violence off and they read the CAPK against you. You need to defend one, that capitalism is good. You need to defend those assumptions, like capitalism is key to solving material changes of inequality. And that not only that, that whatever the alternative's pessimistic like ontology claims is bad. Yeah. Okay. The other argument that I don't think enough people make is that the alternative is worse than whatever the critique accuses the app of. Like, again, like I know I keep using the cap case, so I'll just keep using it. Let's say that your opponent's alternative is like a transition to communism. That is probably going to cause a lot worse harms than some rhetoric in a debate round. You always just want to say that the critique's alternative is always something worse than the app, and that you should vote app because mitigated risk of case outweighs the like, horrible things that the alt could cause. And, pick and choose depending on what you have time, but I think these are generally like the 6 arguments that you want to have. Okay, so now I'm gonna kind of just talk about different critiques because I think that your answers to the alternatives depend on whatever the specific alternative method is. So I'm gonna start with pest case. Are y'all familiar with like pessimistic case, like queer pest, afro pest, etc.? Yeah. Okay, cool. If people aren't, I think that just taking good notes on the section, I think is probably fine enough. Yeah, so with a pest K, the best argument I think you can make is that the alternative fails. Like pessimism critiques just say that there pretty much is a problem in the world and they're not going to fix it. And pest alts, they don't exactly solve the problems that they have with the AF or the status quo. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to explain what a pest K is. Like for example, just with a generic pest K, they'll just say that there's a problem in the world, like a structural problem in the world, and that they're just gonna talk about it and they're gonna be pessimistic about it and they're not gonna like fix it. And pest alts don't like I was saying before, they don't exactly solve the problems it has with the world or the status quo in a way. So this is why you need to say alt fails. Like you don't solve the problems that you have with the status quo, which is bad because uh you can't do anything about it, which is why like a permutation might be good. But if y'all does that kind of make sense? I'm happy to like talk more about it later. Cool. Also, here is where the perm double bind. Oh yeah, of course. Here's where the perm double bind doesn't exactly work because the alternative doesn't say like solve something exactly, but this does mean that because pestles can't solve their problems, that the perm is like a better option. The second reason I think that is like game over a little bit for the critique is that case outweighs or extinction outweighs. The first I think is the best argument is irreversibility. Like extinction is irreversible. So once we're dead, we can't do your movement. We can't solve any of the problems that you have with the status quo or with your 1AC. Like for example, for an example with like disability pets, like you can't fix ableism when you're dead. Um, Another reason is the consent argument. It's unethical to decide for everyone that we're going to risk extinction because there are plenty of other people here in the world, 8 other billion people who think that the world is worth living in. And you violate our consent by letting, let's say, climate change kill everyone or disease kill everyone. You're violating our consent. Additionally, the suffering turn I think works great. Extinction is slow and painful. It just causes future pests. So at least by voting AF, you can mitigate some suffering. In that way, yeah. Okay. Next, I think another good argument where you can use your case best is that it's try or die for the AF. Try or die claims are great. I think judges love them. Yeah, it's great to start at the beginning of your tuer. Just because you want to say that just because there are some societal like aspects that target a certain group in the world, like that whatever is the negative, like critiquing or whatever, it doesn't mean that like progress isn't possible. Social reform for the app is not worth fighting for. Yeah. And then also, like we were talking about before with the ontology debate, I think that it's worth saying that even if the pest case ontology is true, material pain, like with extinction or with structural violence, is that filter in which ontology is spelled. So a risk for the AF is worth a risk. I think that try or die is a great argument. Yeah. Also, just throw this argument in. Even if things can't get better, things can always get worse. More try or die things. Okay. I'm gonna be talking about like a few answers to the CAPK. I don't know if y'all went to the Win CAPK lecture, but I'm just gonna give you some like three great answers to the CAPK that I think are great. Oh, sure. The CAPK is just saying that the AF is sustaining capitalism, and capitalism is bad for structural reasons. It's going to lead to extinction, like capitalism is unsustainable, etc. And for the alternative, answer to, like answering the CAPK. Yeah. Um, does that kind of make sense? Here's where I think the perm double bind works best. The CAPK should always lose to the perm double bind because if the alternative, Fiat's socialist or communist takeover, whatever the alternative does, like communist takeover of the government, it should be strong enough to do both, like communism and the resolution. If you can literally take over a government, you can do the resolution, which I think is why perm double bind is a good argument. I think that an impact turn to this is great. If you like, AF should be able to say that like capitalism is good. It forces the critique to waste more time on why cap is bad. You need to say that what like capitalism solves more like things than the alternative does. Another thing that I think you can do is say like state inevitable, because the alternative doesn't get rid of a state, it like assumes that another state will happen. Like the state will always be bad in a way that impacts are inevitable because there will always be a state. Yeah. Okay. So unpopular opinion, if you're like just starting debate, I wouldn't recommend like thinking too much into this. But if you think that you're really behind after the 1NC, you're super confused about whatever the critique said, I think you should go for a 1AR restart, which a 1AR restart just means that there's new offense in the 1AR. That instead of defending the 1AC being like wealth tax solves structural violence, like whatever it does, you want to create new offense. Like if they say cap bad, capitalism bad, you want to get up in the 1AR and say capitalism is good. This like really takes away the time skew that we were talking about before. There, you had this 7-minute advantage of the 1NC for a debate that the neg is not prepped out for. You could get up and be like, let's say the neg reads the CAPK, says cap is unsustainable as the root cause of planetary destruction. The neg run theory. No, I don't think so, because I don't think that the neg can run theory on this, because you just got up and said that there was a major time skew. Like if the neg can get up and say something totally irrelevant about the topic, you're just defending your assumptions, essentially. If you're getting up and saying capitalism good, you are just defending still some of the assumptions. So I don't think there's a huge skew on that aspect. Yeah, the 1AR needs to say that capitalism is not does not cause the problems that the 1NC says, but that the alternative, like a transition to communism or whatever, solves worse harms. Like capitalism, you want to get up and be like, capitalism is good to stop disease, new wars, like existential, like whatever you want to talk about, like cap good. Capitalism is like good in that aspect. Yeah. Does that kind of make sense? I wouldn't think too much about 1AR restarts if you're just like starting out or something. So yeah. Okay, 1AR theory versus the critique. I would say 1AR theory isn't like the most strategic decision because the neg is prepped out to answer theory, but I think that the critique gets away with a lot of things that the AF never calls people out on. The first is that in most cases, the critique will fiat the alternative and say, and get out of any alternative fails arguments. You want to read theory on that. If, let's say, the 1NC says that they fiat like communist, like a movement or something like that, and that's external to the debate, you should read theory. You should say that like fiating this movement allows the neg to concede that they didn't do anything. They didn't really have to solve any problems. They just fixed it through fiat. Typically, like I think you can just go to like open case list on the wiki and find different interps about utopian fiat bad, private actor fiat bad. I think it's really good because you can read a 15-second theory shell and then the neg has to spend like 30, 40 seconds on it. It's a huge time skew for the 2-inter, which I think puts you ahead for the 2-inter. Yeah. Okay. Also, conditionality. I don't know if y'all know what conditionality is, but it basically just means that if the 1NC reads a lot of positions, like they read the cap K and then they read like a disadvantage, like obviously those two positions contradict and the 2-inter won't go for both. So because the 2-inter can kick like either the alternative or different other positions, because they said it was conditional, that is bad. It's using entire 1-inter because the 1-inter must answer positions that the neg doesn't even have to go for. Also, I think performative contradiction is a good idea. Let's say if they read set call and a counter plan with a disadvantage, they invest time in the same literature that they critique of the 1AC. And you want to just read theory that the AF shouldn't have to defend something and waste time in the 1-inter if the 1NC can defend those same practices that they say are bad. Does that kind of make sense? Personally, I would just go to the open case list wiki and find different interps if your team doesn't have them. Yeah. Cool. Okay, the best part of the debate, the 2-inter. For the 2-inter, you constantly, like when writing the 1AC, you're always thinking about the 2-inter. So for the 2-inter, because you only have 30 minutes, you want to essentially like pick 2 to 3 arguments that you made in the 1-inter, like out of the 6 or whatever on the K, to collapse them. If you go for like say all 6 arguments, you're gonna probably lose the debate because you're not gonna have enough time to answer framework on the critique, have your like try or die claims, like etc. But if the 2-inter does go for the critique, you do need to pick those few arguments. I think what's really good is to write extensions for the 2 to 3 arguments that you think you might sit on and that you think the judge might vote on. Like if you read the perm double bind against the cap K, you need to write extensions for the perm and be like, before the 2-inter, be like, I have answers to this. Like, I don't have to give this all off the dome. Another great argument that you have to make, unless like you go for a 1-inter restart, is that how do you write good extensions? Oh yeah, I can get to that in a second. But yeah, you need your offense to be the critique. Like it's so like super cool if the alternative doesn't solve or like the perm does solve, but if the judge doesn't know what the AF does in the 2-inter, like LOL, just like vote negative on presumption if you don't have any offense, which is why you always need to make those try or die claims that we were talking about before. Like extinction outweighs any risk of the alternative is really important. Like then the judge can be like, well, I voted AF because of this offense, and they said that the alt fails. Like kind of like that. Also, I think that theory can be strategic in some instances, especially if the 2-inter has conceded theory, or if you're comfortable going for an answer theory debate, having 2-inter extensions for the shell is another path to the ballot, or if you can give it off the dome, I mean, that's amazing as well. One thing, like, I would say is that, like, judge, if you think that we're behind on the critique debate, they dropped conditionality, which like is a theory argument, which is a prerequisite to the critique. My only thing that I think is kind of bad about going for 2-inter theory is that like if the K is already like ahead on the framework and the fairness and the clash debate, etc., and they already say that all of the standards don't matter, it's kind of hard to win like fairness and clash on another flow, and you might just be wasting your 3 minutes. Also, one thing that like I've definitely lost to before is kicking like the affin away and going for the perm is that say that the 2NR is ahead on the framing issues. Um like saying that the K is the highest layer in the debate. You can concede that the critique is the highest layer in the debate and win that the permutation is a better option than the alternative alone. And if that doesn't make sense, I can explain that more. Um, but yeah, it's a good way to kind of get yourself out of a messy framework debate. That the critique is the highest layer, but you can win offense under that highest layer. The permutation is superior. Okay, that was like the main answering critiques part of the lecture. One thing I'm not gonna like dive into too deeply, but I do think that you should think about plan inclusive critiques that you might hit at like circuit tournaments. They're called picks. It basically picks endorse the entirety of the affirmative minus some part of the 1AC that they find problematic and that they critique. An example of this versus critical affirmatives is the ballot pick. The 1NC endorses everything in the 1EC minus the request like for the ballot for whatever reasons. Basically, if you're hitting a pick, a plan inclusive critique, and you're either a critical affirmative or a whole res aff, you just need to win why that part that they are picking out of that they found problematic is key to solving the aff, and that the pick fails without that part, which is kind of like getting into the framework debate that we were at before. For an example, with the ballot pick, you can just say that the ballot is key to solving whatever your speech act did. Also, I don't know if y'all have heard of like plan inclusive critique theory. I think that's also a good way to go. Just say that being able to endorse the entirety of the aff minus something is a bad model for debate. Like, why should the 1C get to steal the entire aff? Yeah. Okay, I don't know if we still have 15 minutes. But now we can like have this time to kind of ask questions. I know that I just like talked for a long time, and if that was confusing, I'm happy to answer anything now.
So you mentioned like a framework debate. Could you just briefly go over what a framework debate is?
Yeah, of course. I can also share this presentation with y'all if that would be helpful. Yeah. So the framework is basically just saying, you mean like the critique framework, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. The critique framework just says that it's called like a rule of the judge, that the judge should evaluate the 1AC a certain way. And you, as the app, just want to say that the way that they want the judge to evaluate the round is bad. And that was kind of where we were getting into the fairness in clash debate, essentially. And that's where you want to say that the judge should be weighing the consequences of the plan, right?
So it's kind of like judge instruction.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. But yeah, I'll share this too. Yeah. Serena, if you wanna.
So I think it was the 1AR theory versus the K section.
Mhm.
And you mentioned like a perf, like it would be like a perf con if like the 1NC reads set call and then like an inflation disad. Like,
Yeah.
could you like explain that again? Because like I was like wouldn't they be on like different layers if like one's on case and one's just on like if you say if like someone's reading inequality as their aff
Mhm.
and you're reading set call like in response to their aff like on the case page you say that like they don't solve or like they like you turn their case in some
Yeah.
way like would that still be a perf con?
I think it depends what the no solvency answer is. I think that a case argument that says that the 1AC doesn't have solvency, I wouldn't say that's a perf con. However, I would say if the 1AC said capitalism like is like bad, like is good and stops transition wars or whatever, and then the cap case says no, like that's not real and there are no transition wars, then that could be a perf con because usually what the communist alternative will claim to solve is like that it prevents a war. So if the 1NC says no wars are inevitable, then that's kind of a perf con. I was more talking about like the off case positions kind of contradicting themselves. Like if you like, does that kind of make sense?
It's like if you read like a cap K and then like an econ this that like
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Because like you're still like getting stuff from the capitalist economy when you like say
yeah.
yeah. And I think one of your theories is a great time waster as well. I think there might have been another question in the chat. Hannah, you said how do you write good extensions and how do you write them mid-round? I think that writing good extensions usually will happen before the tournament. Essentially, you just want to take whatever bare bones arguments you have that you made in the 1AR and just contextualize that to the round during your prep time or before the tournament. Like kind of like explode it and like explain it more and especially explain it in context of the critique itself. Does
So
that
it's
kind of
kind
make
of like
sense?
an overview of the points you made in F in relation to like the case.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of just extending whatever arguments you made, and then that will happen before the tournament where you write out extensions for those 1AR positions. Um, but the part that happens in the round is just contextualizing that to the specific critique. Like your answers to the cap K are different from your answers to AfroPest or set call. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Um, is there anything else? Am I does anyone have like any other questions or something that like I said that was super dumb and confusing that could help?
I have like a brief understanding of ontology, but I'm wondering if you could just go into it a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. And like the ontology claim that the critique will make, kind of.
Just like ontology in general.
Yeah, for sure. Ontology will make a claim about the world, like a knowledgeable claim. Well, ontology, the study of knowledge, that the critique essentially just will say that the world operates in a certain way, that humans operate in a certain way, or not even humans, just like a being operates in a certain way, just the way that they think. And so, for example, usually that assumption that like the way that someone thinks is bad and that ontology works against particular bodies. So it kind of makes a structural claim like if hmm, maybe I'll use like the settler colonialism critique as an example. Like if they make an ontology claim that settlers are always going to like are always primed to dispossess indigenous peoples, that is an ontology claim because that is the way that settlers think. And that's usually what like the main thing that the neg has to win the round. Um, because if the neg wins that settlers are always primed to eliminate indigenous people, then and the AF like links to that, it's kind of like game over. In like a lot of senses. It depends like about the debate. But does that kind of make sense? I'm happy to like re-clarify anything.
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
Okay. Um, well, that's pretty much all I have. If y'all like have any more questions, I can put my email in the chat along with the PowerPoint. Um, if that would be helpful to y'all. I'm always like happy to answer any questions about anything. Yeah, I'll put my email in the. Yeah. Um, is that good? Is everyone good? Did we like learn something? Kind of. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna stop sharing. I think um we should be good. Thank you.